and welcome back to the State of Healthcare podcast, or the SOH as we're calling it. Last season, we learned about things from the health provider's perspective. So we learned about our system and kind of some of the frustrations of why it's not necessarily broken, right? It's just doing what it says. We treat and treat. We don't necessarily try to prevent illnesses. We don't try to be proactive for patients. So unfortunately, what we've led to is a system that's not necessarily servicing or providing the actual care that it's supposed to be doing in the first place. This season, we're going along from the journey as the patient perspective. So I'd like to kind of combo. If you haven't listened to season 1, always go on back. But what we're going to be learning is what can you do as a patient? So here we're going to be exploring various conditions, some common, some not so common, and what the people have gone through on their journeys from here. So join us this season as we learn what you can do as a patient to take your own healthcare into your hands in the state of healthcare. Hi, and welcome back to our second episode of the State of Healthcare podcast. And again, this season is about highlighting conditions. So conditions that either people don't know about or things that, are, we say, a common diagnosis. But for everyone, it's a different experience. And sometimes you also get to learn important lessons of what people go through. So today we have Gaby, and I'm going to kind of let her talk a little bit about some of the injuries or some of the things that you've experienced and sort of your journey a little bit.
Okay. Well, I have always been a very active person. I was a dancer for many years. And then really became, I think after I had my first one 8 years ago, really heavily involved into just like getting in shape and been very competitive. So that always pushed me probably a little bit too much over the edge. So I was doing a lot of HIIT classes and just pretty much like anything that was like go, the harder the better, the faster the better, and overworking out for sure. So by the time I started my second pregnancy, which was about 6 years ago. I remember one day I was doing a HIIT class and I tried to do a squat, and all of a sudden I'm like, ow, like my knee just really started hurting, which I never had that. I've never had knee issues that I knew of before. Right. So I'm like, I pulled something, whatever. So I think I was like 4 months pregnant. I kind of kept working out, but not as much. And every time I started doing anything with legs involved and knee joint involved, it was bothering me. So finally had my son, had the 6 weeks postpartum rest. And then I'm like, I'm ready to go. Right. And the day I went back, it's like nothing had happened the minute I started doing the leg exercise. So at that point I had reached out to like a PT place, and they said they diagnosed me with like inflammation and swelling and like kind of like water type of fluid in my knee. So it got better, but I still felt like after I was almost near the end of my PT journey with that particular practice, it like something wasn't really working out very well. And I'm like, it just something was missing. So I remember I reached out to a chiropractor that recommended an MRI finally. Right. So I did an MRI and they diagnosed me with chondromalacia, which is basically a loss of cartilage in the patella, which I had never heard of before. And to my surprise, it was a very common thing for young people. Like sometimes teenage people that I'm like, what is going on? So I've always been a very healthy person. So I never had to encounter any type of problem like that. And it was almost like feeling like they poured cold water all over me, because I'm like, what is happening? Like, I am healthy, I am young.
And you made it through all this dance history and all this stuff for that.
Yes. And I'm like, I never had a problem. So at that point in time, I ended up meeting Tracy. Thank you, Tracy, my savior. And that was about 6 years ago. Yeah, like 6-ish years ago. And it was a really hard journey, the start of a very hard journey, but I feel like Tracy made it like significantly better to where I was able to slowly understand more kind of what this condition was, how to treat it, and how to live with it has been a process, but it was kind of the start of the process. So after I think we completed 3 months of therapy, I was no longer in pain and I was able to do more functional stuff, even though I knew and felt like I wasn't able to do the things I used to do before. So that was kind of the journey. Then I was going back to the gym still with modifications, but I realized that this is, again, a long life journey. And I slowly stopped doing the maintenance work, if you will, even though I wasn't going as crazy. I wasn't doing any more of the stuff that I used to do before. And I had another knee relapse about a year and a half ago and came to see Tracy again. So,
well, I feel like she's being very kind. She's
No,
being very kind.
it's true.
And again, I have an amazing team, so I'll give them the credit on the things. But that is one of the hardest parts with PT, to be honest, is I always feel bad because sometimes with certain conditions, like again, if you've worn down cartilage, if you don't have a knee replacement, if you don't, have whatever, it is one of those things that there are certain things you need to do to maintain. Like, say you have a disc issue in your back, or say you have this or that. Unfortunately, usually I tell people, I'm like, for the rest of your life will be, and the physicians don't usually tell you that stuff, right? As terrible as that sounds, like they're usually like, I've done my thing, go do your rehab and you're good, right? They don't mention like, you're probably going to have to do not 50 exercises. There's probably going to be things you have to change for the rest of your life just to make sure that you don't end up with these flare-ups and the things like that. So
yeah, and I did forget to mention I had some knee injections.
Which I felt like were very helpful. Like you did the PRP and
we did the oh my gosh, I just forgot the name.
Was it the stem cell?
Yes,
yeah,
stem cell. So I did quite a few of those, maybe like 5 each knee, and I feel like they did help. And I also did the collagen,
okay,
kind of every year as a boost, and
Right.
they helped. But honestly, I feel like when I realized more of the progress, it was the maintenance glute workout that I was focusing on, because I really noticed the strength kind of taking over, alleviating the pain and the stress, as opposed to, so, and honestly, I think at some point somebody did say, in order for, maybe it was you, but it was in order for really determine if the stem cells were helpful, it would have to be to do another MRI and kind of compare and contrast. And at that point, I'm like, I don't really want to do another one unless it's absolutely necessary.
Right. So take me on the journey. Like and again, it's hard. I get, like, I don't expect of course I expect every patient to wake up in the morning and like, I'm going to do my therapy exercises, but I don't expect everyone to like constantly, but take me through the journey when you were like, oh no, my knee's starting, because I know this round, I feel like we've had some up and downs and some things like that. So take me through the journey of like, as the patient, how you're feeling with that, or like, what have been your biggest frustrations or your biggest idea, things from there.
So the biggest hurdle for me was to overcome emotionally and mentally the fact that I will no longer be able to do the workouts my body was capable of doing. So there was, in some sense, some sort of loss there, a loss of self, of like, oh my gosh, like, am I young still? Can I, will I be able to do this, even just not have pain in 20 years? So I feel like there were a lot of layers of processing the fact that you can no longer, I mean, you could, but if you did do the wrong workouts, of course, you're going to end up injured worse. So there was some definitely loss and frustration with your body. It's like, how can you not work for me? And how can you, and then I feel like there was also a lot of like learning with how to appreciate your body. There was like a switch there where I'm like, instead of making yourself feel bad for the things you can't do, then make yourself feel better for the things your body can still do. And that once you recover from the flare up, that you will be better than when you are in pain. Right. So I feel like after I went through the first loss of like, I can't be the same person, it was easier to handle triggers again and relapses for injuries. So the second time it was more like, okay, well, I clearly am still not doing form and function appropriately for certain things. So how can I modify it? And I feel like the second time in my flare up, after re-experiencing the pain and thinking about your future and like being a parent, it really starts just preparing you more for like, okay, what can I do? Like, let's focus on the little positives that you see at the time, the little light. So the second time, once I was able to get my pain under control, it was basically saying like, this is the things you have to do for the rest of your life. It's not very much. And I'm still going through some of the trying to adjust workouts, new workouts for the future. But I feel like now that I'm not in pain, I am very happy, and I feel like I can just focus on my daily stuff and then obviously do my maintenance stuff that I will never stop doing. So it's just, it just a really heavy mindset change for me, going from like hardcore to like, let's take it down a couple notches and just like survive for a little bit and enjoy that your body can still do things without pain.
Right. So again, and it's nothing on the beginning of the journey, but it may be for someone who has like kind of, would you consider like an overtraining injury? So what kind of advice would you give other patients? Like if you were like, well, if you're starting to experience this, or say you are hitting it hardcore, because I know we've talked about like, you like to either go all in or like none in, so what kind of advice would you give for someone who wants to do the things, or, or who may be starting to experience an overtraining injury?
I definitely, well, there would be a few things. First of all, I will never underestimate the power of stretching and rest. Those have been like the two things I wish my young self had really considered. I feel like I knew it was important, but it's like nobody has time to stretch. Nobody has time to like not do a hardcore workout because it's only an hour a day. So I feel like instead of focusing on the right things, obviously I was focusing on the wrong things. And now that I do understand the importance of stretching and letting your body rest for how hard you've worked it out, those would be like my first two things to like, when you do a hard workout, take 1 or 2 days of rest, and stretch. And I feel like too, just mentally, maybe having a less aggressive, empowering form of how you think about working out, where you can still, like, you don't have to overwork out to be strong. And I actually have learned that, where I have become stronger in some areas without doing 30 push-ups plus, or that one last one that when your form is not good anymore.
Right.
So I feel like that, plus if you are going to do a hard workout, it's okay to like ask for knowledgeable help and at least just get like, hey, am I doing the right things? Am I doing the right forms? Because after my experience, I feel like I lost some trust in knowledge base from trainers that I would see, and I'm like, how are they teaching that? Or how are they not teaching you how to squat or how to use your glutes? My glutes were the weakest ever when I thought I was working out my legs, and they were not. And that was a huge problem of
why your knees got
exactly
abuse.
Yeah. So I feel like being conscious of form and listening to your body, and if you're tired, don't do it. Like, I feel like there's always this war between the will and I can do it because I'm strong, and your body being like, please be kind to me. So just being mindful of body. That. Yes.
Okay. Now, as a mom, and with all the things that like, how are you setting? I know you have your maintenance ones, and we go over, and she's very good about keeping up with her glutes and her core, which I'm very proud of her for, and like, the things like that. But like, I know your kids are starting to get into like, they're looking at some dance things and stuff like that. How does that affect like things that you're looking for sports and things for them, or like?
I feel like now that they're getting a little bit older, I would like to start incorporating more. I mean, honestly, even just like send them to like like you when they're a little bit older, just so they learn how to do like lifting boxes and how to reach for things. I feel like those things are beyond important, and we never learn how to do that. And we learn how to do them after we've injured ourselves from the constant movements, poor movements that we have learned over the years. So at least from that sense, I know I have some control over teaching them proper form for the daily things. So when they do get interested in more of the dancing or working out, depending on what their interests are, then obviously put more focus on like proper function and form for those particular things at the time.
You know, it's interesting because I've talked with different therapists and stuff about in the schools and stuff, like they get them in the weight room and they do all these things, and it's not a picking on the schools because we already know the schools already taxed enough, right? But there's not a lot of like form focus of like you put these kids through all these things and then you get them out and you're doing all these sports, and the coaches try the best they can, and you know, I've seen different programs trying to do, but again, I appreciate that you bringing up form, because for me, it's always, you know, I would rather someone do less reps of really well done than to like churn out a bunch of them where they're not actually activating the muscle or doing the thing they're supposed to be doing, because they're probably just learning a bad pattern, then they probably potentially hurting themselves, and then they're thinking they're churning out all this stuff. But it is interesting that you talk about that for your kids, like learning that, because I feel like unfortunately a lot of them don't get that, and then they go on into college and maybe they don't still get it there, and then we see them later as adults with injuries and all these bad patterns. And I'm like, well, let's fix this now, you know?
Yes.
So,
well, and form became even more relevant for me because, as you know, after dealing with my knee issues, I had been for a few years kind of getting these like back pains. And I'm like, I just overdid it. I did too much cleaning at once. But then I realized that it was happening more often than not. And there was a point where it got so severe that like half of my back was in severe pain. It just felt like a rock and like hard and really uncomfortable. Well, that was for a few years. And as I was trying to progress my knee situation and second trigger, I eventually found out that my back was trying to help and kind of over prevent me from like doing something with my knee if I wasn't going to do it right. So then as we were working on my knees, then my back became an issue. And that's also when I realized, on top of arm injury I had separately, they were literally going at the same time. And it was really hard to mentally, emotionally, and all of the above, physically, to do really much between my arm, my back, and my knees. And it became a little chaotic.
Yes. And that's why I feel bad. Like your journey got complicated a little bit. And that is one of the things. So like in general for people, their knees will get the brunt of things, and then their back will try to help them, especially when like the other things aren't firing or the form, you know. So that was one of those things where, again, trying to just, but again, those are those muscles that are like, I've got you, right? And so I know that was also a really frustrating time for you where you're like, why am I even trying anything? And then now it's been like, let's clean this up where the back doesn't have to help all the time. So it's interesting because that was a pattern that was kind of slowly establishing. And then as we were trying to clean up the knee, the back was like, I've got this, because it had been used to always doing those things. So I know that was a really hard part of the journey. And again, I know sometimes it still like gets you a little bit where it's like, but I feel like you're kind of turning a little bit of a corner and we're like getting into some things. But how do you feel like that, like, how do you feel now, I guess, on the thing? And you can be mean, you can be like, you were terrible, it was all the things, but like
no, I mean, honestly, I feel at peace, which is like a feeling I had been longing to have for, it felt like 2 years between just so many things happening. And I'm like, am I gonna ever just not have pain? So the first time it was, oh, am I ever gonna be able to work out in a different way but still work out? And then the second time is, can I live without pain? Can I go up the stairs without pain? Can I, you know, clean the bathrooms and not have this back pain? So it just became more of like a functional reality where I'm like, at this point, I could care less about the workout. If I am burning calories, if I'm building muscle, I just want to have a healthy body that will preserve for as long as possible
Mm-hmm.
and not have these issues when I'm 60s or 70s, and obviously prevent any surgical involvement, that kind of thing. So if you had asked me this question a year and a half ago, I probably would be crying and just like desperate and not seeing any sort of like at the end of the tunnel whatsoever. And right now, I think I have been less motivated to do my exercises and just work out in general, because I feel like I've been enjoying not having to think about it, not having to think, oh, I can't reach the cupboard because my arm doesn't hurt, or oh, I can't do this because my back. And it just was so mentally fatiguing that I feel like at this point I'm like, I can function, I can go up the stairs, and I can just kind of just enjoy the moment of focusing on like doing an activity without having all this noise in my head of like, it hurts, I can't do it, what is going to happen, am I going to be sore? So I feel better, and now I'm just hoping that I will continue on this evolution journey to continue to involve more things, but even more modified than the last time. So
well, and I think what you kind of described, a lot of people go through, maybe they don't always realize, right? So again, people are kind of like onions, you're peeling back the layers. So, and then that's the frustration that a lot of people get, is they start to see one thing and then they're like, oh, but this also hurts, and then this, and so then they're like, am I even just going to be able to use my body? So I do see that a lot in the rehab process, because as you're like cleaning up some things, like sometimes then another thing starts to take over or starts to do whatever, and then we got to fix that pattern. And so you're peeling back these layers of like what this person has used that's gotten them there. Whether or not, again, sometimes life just happens, right? Sometimes like you grab something and it's just heavy and your body's like, nope, not today. But so I think what you described, a lot of people go through with it. And then there is that frustration process. And I have to give you credit that you still hung in there, even though I annoyed you through all the things and was like, no, we've got this. We're going to get through this. It's going to be great. That like, despite all the things that life was throwing at you and like we're trying to clean up from there, I feel like kind of like, again, it's for most of my patients, I want to find whatever goals work for them. But like, I think what you described is a lot of what people go through in the rehab process, where they see like my body's falling apart and all this stuff. But I think functional movement and being able to do things without pain is a lot of people's goals.
yeah, and I feel like something important to say that was probably one of the most challenging was knowing that if you were already in pain or something was sore from the injury, any little tweak or movement can be very triggering physically and kind of take you back a few steps, where you're like, I literally just moved and now it feels like it's like 10 times worse.
Right.
And you feel like you let it heal and then you keep poking at it. So it's this like tango dance, but not a fun one, where you kind of like have to remember that you will be going back and forth, and it's not going to be this like perfect, going,
it's
up.
a little of these.
It's
right?
a lot of ways.
Ideally, you want it this way, but you've got a lot of this that gets you on that journey. And it also comes with it, I think, a little bit of almost a PTSD of like bringing back that original injury. And you're like, am I back here? Is this what just happened to me? Oh my gosh, have I flared up? What am I going to do? So I understand that it's like you do a tweak and you're like, oh no, I've lost all that progress. What am I going to do with this?
Exactly.
So, and again, the hardest part that I have to break to people is sometimes when you do have an injury, that area can heal, but it may always be a little bit weaker. So like with the knees, even if years later something happens, that's an area that might go to, because that's a little bit of a less stronger area, or it's had an injury. So that's going to attack that, so that's why you keep trying to build and do as much as you can, but then you're not abandoned. So we're here for you for whatever you need. But like,
totally.
But again, I get that, because like, I think you're describing what a lot of people see in the rehab journey. I think they think they're just going to go, the therapist is going to immediately fix it, right? And then they're going to be like, boop, boop, boop. And it's a lot of times I have to give people the speech that it's going to be this, right? And then also, here's what you get to work on for the rest of your life, because unfortunately, this is an area that's a little bit weaker. We've got to just make sure your body doesn't react on that.
Yeah. And then there's the different levels of like injuries. There's the injury that like you twist your ankle, you just ice it, take a rest, and then you're kind of fine. And then there's the one that you probably have to take care a little bit more. And then there's the one that like affects how you move on a minute basis. And I feel like I have had them all now. And I feel like again, kind of as an athletic person, when you reach that point, it's just not, no workout, no amount of anything, I don't care what good of a shape you get, is worth getting to that point, because it's just so, it's so challenging, and especially when you have that mentality of like invincible, I can do it, no, it won't happen to me. When it's happening to you, you're like, you have to process that, and then you have to just like kind of go with the flow and throw the towel and take a step back and just let the universe help you out at this point.
Well, and again, I do appreciate, because you have, I mean, you were like, I didn't do as much, but you have kept pecking at it. You have kept up your strength with the things. Still does amazing headstands. So, very excited by that. So I guess it's kind of, I think that is especially hard, especially from someone with an athletic background and that like push mentality. Because my job, I'm either pushing people a little bit more or pulling them back and being like, okay, you need to let those rest. And so that's hard when like you just used to pushing, right? And so, and it is also kind of, I like what you described, almost feeling like your body betrayed you. And so you kind of have to go through the stages of like grieving, like you've lost something, and in your mind, probably even when you first started, you're like, it's just a knee problem. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, why am I making life changes?
Exactly. One thing I'm grateful for, I mean, obviously I don't love that my body will never be the same. My knees will never be the same, but I am at least grateful that it's happened early on to be able to retrain my body, retrain my brain. So when I don't reach my 50s or 60s, I'm like, what the heck is going on? It might be too late by then. By then I might have required surgery, who knows? So I'm grateful that I was able to learn the hard way through this process and focus on the things that will be better for my body long term, and not just in the immediate gratification of feeling strong and building muscle, and which is always great, but it's just now my priority has become the first thing you said.
So I guess I think that's I mean, any age you can do the training or whatever, but it is true, like the sooner you can learn the functional things, which again, or like avoid the overtraining or avoid these things, the sooner you can correct that, the better. And then to keep yourself mobile and doing all these things, so you will be safe for whatever, again, is kind of a PT goal, but yeah.
Totally. Well, there's just so much that we do on a daily basis. Like I said, anywhere from like, learning how to properly have your body when you're cleaning, like cleaning the floors, the toilets, grabbing the weeds, like sweeping, mopping, reaching, and all these things, and just posture in general. I feel like it's beyond overlooked. Everybody just focuses on like what they need to do and not, okay, how can I do it in the best way to not get to that point? But I feel like until you are in an injury situation, you don't think about those things because it's not your reality. So it has to become, unfortunately, for me at least, it was like the only thing that was going to stop me from continuing to overwork out.
Well, and it's terrible as that now, I do weird little videos of how to do these things properly, because I have so many patients. I'm like, what happened? Why we were doing okay? And then they're like, oh, there's nothing. I just did this. And I'm like, did you clean something? Did you do this? And they're like, oh no, I was just moving things around, or I cleaned my toilet, or I cleaned this and that. And I'm like, crap, because then all this work we did maybe got undone because someone spent the weekend or they overdid it, like they did the cleaning too much. And again, you think in your mind, I just cleaned for a couple hours, but you didn't take a break in the middle, maybe stretch, or you weren't using proper form. And it's crazy to think about that, but I do get a lot of patients where I'm like, oh, well, now we have to spend this session getting you back in shape because you did all this stuff instead of using the right form with it, which again, when you're healthy, you don't think about, but it could also just be setting you up for stuff later. So it's better to learn. But...
Yeah. Well, and even when I had my back situation really at its worst, I remember being like, so how do I load the dishes? Like, what is the best way? And then you almost like untrain your brain, and you're like, have I really been doing it that horrible all this time? And just, and then you realize like I was using like my mid back to reach. So anytime I would reach for anything, it was, it took me, I feel like a couple months to really be aware of it. And for a second there, for many seconds, I was like modifying, like just second to second where I was like, okay, I'm going to go move this. How am I going to do it? And again, it probably was just a little crazy, but I feel like that was the only way for me to really be aware and modify the things I was doing wrong.
And again, because you learned that pattern and that part of your back was like, we've got it, right? We're going to do the things.
So automatic.
Yeah, but then that was causing so much pain with all this other stuff and not allowing you to do the patterns. And I remember we were like, how do I load my dishwasher? Because I think something's going on with this. Or how do I reach down and pick up the toys? Or how do I do this? My back's just kicking in so much. So it was just learning those patterns. So, which again, save your back, save your knees. So I know. But I do appreciate you coming to kind of share. Because sometimes, again, I think people come and they're like, oh, I'm going to physical therapy because I have knee pain. And it's just a simple diagnosis. Nothing is just a simple diagnosis. I wish I could just be like, oh, easy peasy, right? Every person is their own story. And so, probably people think there might be people out there who are like, oh, this should be easy. Why is my knee still hurting? Or why is this happening? Or what have I not learned? So I think maybe they also might feel like they're alone because of the mental component. Nobody addresses necessarily that you might be mourning the loss of something you can't do now.
Well, and also, I feel like going back to the beginning of my story, how in the first PT experience, I was not diagnosed properly and I was not training the things I ended up training with you that weren't as functional. And it's just a reminder that not every physician or PT is gonna provide you with the best recommendations for what you have. And I feel like, at least for chondromalacia, just in the experience that I had and just reading things, since I became part of a lot of groups online and in social media, just to like learn and read and things like that, how because of this condition is still not very known or there is a lot of awareness there, I still feel like there is a lot of treating with exercises that are not really targeting to alleviate the issue, and they're training body parts that are not the ones you should treat for that particular condition. So I feel like if you do end up diagnosed with something like that and you end up kind of in the wrong place for that, it's going to be even that much harder because you feel like you're not progressing. You're like, what is it something I'm doing? And then of course, you're not going to question the professional because that's what they're there for. But, as a healthcare worker and therapy background, not in PT, there's always just improvements and changes to how we do things and modalities and therapies. So I feel like it's good to be aware of that not because you're not progressing, it's because you're doing it wrong, but it could be based on the therapy material
well, and the hard part is, again, from a therapist perspective, sometimes you're in a hurry, right? If you're in a busy clinic or you're getting all these things and you're just like, oh, knee pain, okay, let's do these exercises or whatever. So sometimes people don't always get the one-on-one time to spend with the person, to watch their form, to do all these things. And so that's why I'm always telling patients, like, fight for your healthcare, right? Like, if you're not progressing or things aren't and you're not getting what you need there, fight for your healthcare, as terrible as that sounds, because again, it's nothing against the hardworking people out there, but sometimes they're dealing with a bunch of things where they've got all these people and you're just like, okay, try these exercises. But that's why, and even with our journey, as we've been up and down trying to clean things or do whatever, I prefer that I'm able to just hang out with you for the time and watch you do them and like look at the form and like, let's try this and be able to spend more time where we can actually like look at it. You know what I mean? So yeah, and it is hard because again, sometimes if like, I'm sure people have gone through that where they've been misdiagnosed, they've been sent to this, and so it's this long journey trying to fight through your healthcare system. And that's a little bit kind of like the podcast, like the state of healthcare. So, if you're not getting what you need or it's not, and in PT world, we've seen chondromalacia patella a lot, right? So as a PT, you're like, oh, whatever, it's this, or so unfortunately, sometimes you might just get dismissed and be given a bunch of like knee strengthening exercises when it's actually you need to be working on other things that aren't doing your job, and that's why the knees are having issues. So
Correct. Yeah. And that's what I feel like it happened. I was coming across a lot of like kind of antiquated ways of treating it, that it no longer is how you should treat something.
Right.
And that was like, again, super grateful that I found you, because I feel like not only you understood the condition, but instead of focusing on just doing the repetitive, just focusing on the knee joint
extensions or quad sets or whatever,
it made me understand that it's not about working out the part that's damaged, it's about working out other areas that will support the injury in a way that you can increase function without like re-injuring,
right,
or not, or not strengthening the right areas.
Right. You got to find what actually caused the problem in the first place to clean that up so that you don't keep having an issue.
Exactly.
So, no, so that's just, it is kind of interesting. And I appreciate that you brought that point out for people with it. Just, find that. And PT is constantly evolving. I have to say, I've been lucky in a lot of people that I've encountered who emphasize function, because we always, we're taught like you screen above and below, you address different things. But yeah, so again, if you're not getting results or you're not getting the things, fight for your healthcare, look for, find other solutions, reach out to people. There's lots of resources out there, support groups. Again, I've heard that from other patients. Joining support groups to get ideas sometimes is a good method, but but if you could give one last piece of advice for people, what would you, you've given a lot of really good nuggets. I have to say, this has been a really good, I appreciate that.
Of course. I do have one last piece of advice I did not mention. Do not wait to get diagnosed. Do not wait until it's a little bit better, it's a little less swollen, because what you're doing might continue to contribute to the problem and make it worse. And that's also what happened when I injured my arm. That was completely separate from what I had. I carried something really heavy and I was like, oh, I just pulled it, I'll keep kind of working out. And it was bothering me, but I was like, no big deal. Obviously I hadn't learned my lesson even at that point, but we're human.
Right. It's okay.
And then at that point, I continued to work out until I like fully injured it, where I could have just let it rest, probably seen Tracy or just a professional to see what was happening, and just listening to my body. So between like listening to your body and like, again, being like, oh, I don't want to spend the money. I don't want to spend the time. I don't have time. You will have to make time even more when you get horribly injured by waiting. And I will never do that after that. Hopefully I don't get to that point, but if I do,
that's not going to happen again. I don't have to worry about it. But I have heard that from people who have had like an initial thing and they're like, I just didn't have the time, or I didn't want to do the things. And I'm like, well, now your body has said, I've broken down and you're going to take the time. And now the journey is longer because you didn't do something right away. So that is actually a very good piece of advice. And I couldn't say it better myself. So yay, thank you.
Of course.
So, well, we are going to sign off and let Gabby have her day, but I really appreciate you coming and sharing your story and all of your piece of advice and all of your hard work on your journey. And
thank you for everything.
You're welcome. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the State of Healthcare podcast. We hope that we were able to gain some valuable information, or at least some insight into what goes into some of these conditions from this patient's story. Again, please feel free to always share. Please follow us online at Better Fit Therapy. And again, if there's any conditions or things that we haven't addressed or that you might find interesting, you can always message us online and we'll be willing to investigate. But again, taking your own healthcare into your hands is probably the most important lesson that you can learn from this. So unfortunately, in the state of healthcare that we're in now, you do have to fight for the things that are important. We encourage you to take a more active role in your healthcare and be able to participate so that we can fix the system where we're at now. Thank you again and have a good day.